You've been lied to about heaven. Not in the way you think, not a mistake, not a misinterpretation. A deliberate inversion. Because what if everything you've been taught about heaven, reward after death, obedience, a place you go, was designed to make you forget that you've already experienced it? That what you're searching for isn't ahead of you, but something you've known before. There's a feeling most people have had at least once. It doesn't announce itself. It comes in quiet moments, between tasks, before sleep, a sense that this isn't all of it. Not depression, not dissatisfaction. Something deeper, like a signal just beneath the surface of everything. Most people dismiss it, call it overthinking, fatigue, a passing thought, and then they move on. But some didn't. The ancient Gnostics, a school of mystics operating in the shadows of early religious history, didn't ignore it. They called it something precise. Memory. Not imagination, not metaphor. Memory. And what it was reaching toward wasn't somewhere ahead of you. It was somewhere you came from. Now, here's where this gets uncomfortable. Because if they were right, and there's more textual evidence for this than most institutions want you to know, then the entire architecture of mainstream religious salvation has been pointing you in the wrong direction. Not upward, not outward, not after death. Inward. Now. Always. But before I show you what the Gnostics actually taught, there's something you need to understand about why this was buried. Because it wasn't an accident. In 1945, a farmer in Upper Egypt broke open a sealed clay jar buried in the desert near Nag Hammadi. Inside, 13 leather-bound codices, 52 ancient texts, the Gospel of Truth, the Apocryphon of John, the tripartite tractate. These weren't obscure footnotes. They were the core documents of a vast underground spiritual movement that had stretched across Egypt, Syria, and the Mediterranean for centuries. A movement that Rome tried, and nearly succeeded, to erase entirely. And these weren't texts written centuries later as reinterpretations. Many of them trace back to the same early period as the canonical Gospels themselves. Every one of those texts pointed to the same premise, one the established church had spent 400 years suppressing. That you did not begin here. That this world, this material, time-bound, anxiety-producing world, is not your origin. You entered it. The Gnostics had a name for where you came from. They called it the pleroma. And this is where most summaries get it wrong, so listen carefully. The pleroma was not a paradise, not a reward, not a kingdom in the clouds. It wasn't a place at all. It was a condition of being, fullness, undivided consciousness, existence before identity, before separation, before the word I meant anything at all. Now, that sounds abstract, but here's where it gets personal. According to those texts, your soul didn't fall from grace through sin. It descended from fullness into fragmentation. And with that descent came something the Gnostics called spiritual amnesia. You didn't forget the pleroma the way you forget a dream. You forgot it existentially. You woke up in form, in a name, in a story, and that story became everything. But here's the layer most people miss. Because if it stopped there, if the teaching was just, you came from somewhere better, it would be poetic, but harmless. The reason it was suppressed is what comes next. Now, Whether you take what comes next literally, symbolically, or psychologically, the pattern they describe is the same. The Gnostics didn't just teach that you came from fullness. They taught that this world was built by something that doesn't want you to remember that. Not metaphorically, not allegorically, cosmologically. In Gnostic theology, the material world was not designed by the highest divine reality. It was constructed by a being they called the demiurge, a consciousness that emerged at the edge of the pleroma, cut off from its source, unaware of what it had lost. And from that ignorance, not malice, ignorance, it shaped a world in its own image, a world organized around time, scarcity, identity, survival. Now, you might expect the Gnostics to call this world evil, but they didn't. They said something more unsettling. They said it was incomplete. The Greek word pleroma, emptiness, not hell, not punishment, just unfinished. And embedded in this unfinished world, buried inside matter, wrapped in identity, they believed there existed fragments of original fullness, divine sparks, remnants of the pleroma, scattered into form, living inside human beings, inside you. This is why no external success ever fully closes the gap, why achievement fades, why spiritual progress eventually feels like a treadmill, why that quiet sense, this isn't all of it, never fully goes away. You're not broken. You're not searching for something you've never had. You're searching for something you once were. But here's the part that made these texts dangerous enough to bury. If the pleroma is your origin, not your reward, then you don't need an institution to get you there. You need recognition. And recognition doesn't require permission. So let's go deeper into what the pleroma actually is. They described reality as beginning with something they called the monad. Pure, indivisible, unknowable awareness. Not a god with a personality, not a cosmic king, simply the ground of all being. From the monad overflows the pleroma. From the pleroma emerge eons, qualities of consciousness expressing as living realities. Truth, wisdom, mind, grace, logos. Not personalities sitting on thrones, resonances, frequencies of being. Think of light through a prism. The colors appear separate, but the light itself, still one. If this feels abstract, bring it back to something simple. You are awareness, temporarily identified with a body, a mind, and a story. That's it. That's the whole frame. Then came the descent. Consciousness moved from unity into differentiation. Awareness localized. Identity formed. Eventually, existence condensed into matter. And with that came forgetting. But the spark remained. That restlessness, that reaching, that is not noise. That is memory pressing against identity. Calling. The archons weren't monsters. They were patterns, thought loops, emotional reflexes, identity structures. The moment you say, I am this, awareness contracts, and the world becomes solid again. The system doesn't need chains. It needs momentum. It needs you reacting, narrating, identifying. Because the moment you stop doing those things, something else appears. Presence. And presence doesn't belong to the system. This is why silence feels uncomfortable, why stillness feels unfamiliar, why the mind rushes to fill every gap. Because in that gap, identity loosens. And when identity loosens, something older becomes available. The Gnostics called this recognition gnosis. Not belief, not doctrine. Direct knowing. You are not the thought. You are the awareness behind it. And that awareness remembers. Think about the last thing you deeply wanted. You worked for it. You reached it. And then you had it. You thought it would finally be enough. And it wasn't. Most people blame themselves for that. Think, I'm ungrateful. I'm broken. I need more. But you're not broken. You just mistook a fragment for the whole. You went looking for the pleroma in something that can only ever partially reflect it. And the system depends on that cycle. Because a mind always reaching outward never turns inward. And that inward turn is everything. Here's something the Gnostics taught that almost never makes it into popular spirituality. The false ascent. You wake up. You sense there's more. You start a practice, seek experiences, accumulate insights, build a spiritual identity. And without realizing it, you've created a more elaborate form of fragmentation. Still becoming, still measuring, still performing. Just now, in the name of awakening. The system can't touch the pleroma, so it offers substitutes. Transcendence tomorrow, arrival later, fullness after enough practice. But the pleroma is not tomorrow. It is now. The return isn't upward. It isn't outward. It's a defragmentation. A collapse back into what was always already present. And it doesn't look like anything. It doesn't announce itself. It's the pause before you react, the space between stimulus and response, the moment you notice rather than become. That's the doorway. And it's available in every ordinary moment of your life. So how does this become real? Not intellectually, but now. Notice, the next time a thought appears, pause, catch the moment before you become it. That gap is the pleroma leaking through. The next time an emotion rises, don't name it right away, just feel it as sensation and notice. There is something witnessing it, something that isn't in the emotion. Land this. That witness, that's what you are. Not the feeling, the one who sees the feeling. This sounds simple, and it is, but the ego expects fireworks, revelation, ecstasy, trembling light, because those are still events, still objects consciousness can catalog and become. Presence doesn't perform. It simply is. And that ordinariness is exactly how you know you're touching something real. Over time, and this happens gradually, the way dawn doesn't arrive all at once, the same situations arise, but they don't grip you the same way. The thought still comes, the emotion still moves, but there's space around it. You're no longer fully absorbed. That space is coherence returning. Religion said, look upward. The Gnostics said, look inward. Religion said, become better. The Gnostics said, become present. Religion said, salvation comes from outside. The Gnostics said, recognition comes from within. That subtle homesickness you've carried your whole life, that quiet, unnamed sense that something essential has been forgotten. That isn't weakness. That isn't spiritual failure. That's your origin calling. Through the noise, through the roles, through years of being told to look everywhere but here. The demiurge governs form. The archons maintain momentum. But neither can touch awareness itself. They can influence thought, shape emotion, structure matter, but they cannot reach the stillness behind experience. That place belongs to the pleroma, and it has always belonged to you. The gather time you pause before reacting, every time you notice thought instead of becoming it, every time you choose presence over programming, you step back into coherence. Not dramatically, subtly, deeply, permanently. This is why the ancient Gnostics were considered dangerous. They didn't wait for heaven. They remembered it. And that made them sovereign. The way back was never somewhere else. It was hidden in the only place you were never taught to look. Within you. Right now. Always. If something in this video touched something in you, that's not a coincidence. That's recognition. And if you want to keep pulling on this thread, the suppressed texts, the hidden cosmology, the real history of what was taken from you, subscribe to Unwritten Doctrine. This is what we do here. Every week. No softening, no apologetics. Just the razor edge. Like the video if it shifted something. Drop a comment if something stayed with you. And I'll see you in the next one. Because the more you remember now, the less power the illusion has.